1 Timothy 6 and verse 17. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. God who provides. And that is the topic that I really wanted to delve into, to share some thoughts on, the God who provides. And when we use the word provision, what we're talking about is God's supply. That He would be the source of our lives. And that covers every aspect of our life. And so when we talk about provision, what we tend to do is go straight towards a material aspect of that provision, which is not wrong, by the way. In us talking about the provision of God, we are not to shy away that God desires to bring material provision into our lives. We live in a tactile, time and space, material world, and therefore God works through that means. But it's to cover every aspect of life. And so He is to be the supply of all of our needs, from psychological, emotional, spiritual, as well as material. What I wanted to talk to us about today is simply this statement. The way that we see is the way that we will be. The way that we see things will affect the experience of our life. I want to go to a passage of scripture in the Old Testament. And it's kind of in context of what this time is now with regards to Sukkot, in the wilderness, in the desert, the people of God heading towards the promise of God, the promise being fruitfulness. There is a land flowing milk, honey, fruitfulness, blessing. The promise is there. It is a promise of God's grace and His favor, but the journey towards it. The way you see is the way that you will be. Numbers chapter 13, we have a scenario where the people of God are now at a threshold point where they are close to stepping into the promise of God from a literal geographical perspective. And what Moses does, Moses being the one used of God to lead the people of God towards the promise, he does something that's pretty wise. He gathers 12 leaders from the 12 tribes that make up the people group known as the Israelites, and he sends them on a scouting mission. He sends them to spy the promise. And we're going to find a very interesting scenario taking place. Numbers 13, but let me just share a story quickly about a travel that we did. We lived in the United Kingdom for about 11 years, and then we moved from the UK to living in Australia for 7 years. And then when we left Australia, we were just incredibly blessed, did very well out of a property sale. The home that we lived in, we sold, and it was just a great time to sell. I believe there was God's grace upon it, without a shadow of a doubt. We decided to invest into a travel for our family. So we took our kids out of school, and for 6 months, we traveled around the world. We bought a round-the-world ticket. We traveled through a whole range of places. It was one of the best things we could ever have invested our finances into. And then we found ourselves in Iceland. And the ironic thing about Iceland is that it's green, and Greenland is ice. But Iceland is a phenomenal place. So we hired a camper van and drove around Iceland. We made the very bad mistake of, on the first night, because we had like a little kitchen in the camper van, we bought some fish, cooked the fish inside the camper van, and some of it went down the sink in the camper van, and literally for the next week, we smelt like the ocean. But in a bad way, not a good way. Like literally everything, like our backpacks, our clothes, everything was just like fish. you go to Iceland for is to see the Northern Lights. I don't know whether you have heard of the Northern Lights, but it's this incredible natural phenomenon that the sky turns into luminous colors. So we're excited. We go to Iceland. We're going to see the Northern Lights. And there's a website that you can go onto that tells you where you should be and what time, because the activity at that time of the year is conducive to you seeing the Northern Lights. And it just so happened that it was our very first night in Iceland. We're like, this is too good to be true. So the idea is that you drive out into the countryside, and the cool thing about Iceland is that if you have a camper van, you literally drive anywhere, park, and just sleep. And so we drove out of the city, and you want to get away from any of the artificial light. You want to be in the natural light. So the first night, we are so pumped. We are excited to see the Northern Lights. We get out of our camper van. It's pitch black. We're looking around. Nothing. We're like, man, okay, that's interesting. Obviously, they weren't there. Next morning, we move on to another campsite. Tam is overhearing an Australian couple who are traveling at the same time. And they look at Tam and they're like, did you see the light show last night? I'm like, no, we didn't see it. And they're like, you don't actually typically see it with your natural eye. You actually have to use a device, your camera, with a filter. So I want to show you a little video, and I'm glad my kids aren't in here because they don't get too stoked when I show little videos of them. The way you see something is the way you will be. It's not about what you see. It's about the way that you see it. So this is what we saw with our natural eye.
Take a photo of the Northern Light. It won't work. Is that Dad? Dad. Hey, Mama, can you shine your light to see if that's Daddy? Because I want to run to him if it is. Because
Nothing, right? No Northern Lights there, right? Same night, okay? Choosing to see the same thing in a different way by way of a filter. This is actually what was going on in the sky. So that was captured through a filter. After they have scouted the land of Numbers 13, they came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. I'm not saying that at all. I feel like it needs a roll. Paran. There they reported to them, to the whole assembly, and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave this account to Moses. We went into the land which you sent us to, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is the fruit. So 12 people go to a land. They bring back a report. All 12 saw the same thing. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in the Negev. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, all enemies, right? Live in the hill country. And the Canaanites live near the sea and along the Jordan. Verse 30. Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. But the men who had gone up with him said this, we can't attack those people. They're stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. They said, the land we explored devours the people living in it. All the people we saw there were so great, they were like giants. Key verse. The way we see things is the way that we be. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, is what they say. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes. It's amazing to me how A group of people could see the same thing and yet see it differently. And when it comes to provision, when it comes to God's supply, when it comes to living fruitful, the way that we see is significant in our experience and how we be.